want to talk to you now about diagnosis, and we've been tracking through our general model of plan change. We talked about entering and contracting. Now we're going to focus a little bit on diagnosing. Later we'll talk more about planning and implementing specific changes, and then we'll talk about how we evaluate the success of our interventions and institutionalize the new systems that we put in place. So when we think about diagnosing from the field of OD, we use something we call systems thinking. And just to be clear, there are, broadly speaking, two kinds of systems. There are closed systems and there are open systems. Now, it's hard for me to even think of a really good example of a closed system, but a closed system is something that's completely self-contained. It doesn't have any inputs, no outputs. It's hard to think of one, but I could think of lots and lots of open systems. Open system has inputs, and those inputs are converted into something that we call outputs, positive energy, something. I can give you a good example of an open system right now because she's right here beside me. Sophie, pop up. Pop up. Come on. Show your face. Can you see? Can you see her? Well, this is Sophie. Sophie is a German Shepherd, and she would fall into the classification of an open system. You give Sophie some food, you give Sophie some water, you give Sophie a little attention, a little bit of training. Next thing you know, you have an output, right? And the output from Sophie is fantastic companionship, loves to play fetch, all those kind of things. Those are outputs. Plus, she's a great watchdog. So she's an open system. She has to have energy, she has to have water, she has to have air, she has to have food, she has to have love. The output along the way, I know what you were thinking. That's not it. The output is what she does, her life, her job, being a dog. Okay, so when it comes to organizations, we can think of them as open systems too. So open system has input. So if we look at a company or a business, let's say some business from the private sector, we're going to see a building or a place with a bunch of people working, a bunch of machines and equipment. And so nothing happens there unless we have input. So the people themselves are an input. They come to work. The raw material they use to make a product or service would be an input. They have to use energy, electricity, water, maybe chemicals if they're making a product. For example, at Georgia Pacific, we make bathroom tissue. It takes a lot of different materials to make that. Some of our facilities make their products 100% out of waste paper. So you have to go find the waste paper and buy it. It's an input. Then you have to, once you have it, you have to convert that product into an output. So the folks use their brains and technology, and they put together a product that's great. And when it comes out the door and gets loaded onto a truck, boom, that's an output. And that output, of course, is then sold in the marketplace and hopefully value is created, which we've discussed before. So this is an open systems model. So we can use that same model now to start thinking, how can we help people inside the organization to move from a current state to a better state, which is what we do in organization development. So to do that, it's helpful for us to think of the organization as existing in three levels. First level, we would call the enterprise-wide or organizational level, which is the whole company, the whole business that we're trying to help. The second level would be groups or units within the organization, or the group level. And then the third level that we work with, we call the individual level, the individuals working inside the groups, inside the organization. Now, OD consultants can work at all of these levels, some of these levels, parts of these levels, it just depends. So let me give you an example. For the last several years at Georgia Pacific, we've been working on an organization level change initiative to change our culture. Now this happened after we were acquired a few years ago by a large privately held company in Wichita, Kansas called Koch Industries. Now Koch Industries has a way of operating, a particular culture where they hold themselves to the very highest ethical standards. They have a set of principles that are based values and beliefs that they want every employee to embrace and to demonstrate consistency with in their work. we feel, the company feels, that this is at least as important as making products or services. We've got to get people to be principled in their behavior. So we have this culture. Now, it's not that easy to do. So for the last 5.5 years, with somewhere around 45,000 employees, the ROD team has been working to change the culture. Now, how do we do this? Well, we're actually working this project on all three of the levels. Organizational level, right? So the president, the senior leaders, the folks who have the greatest influence over all the organization, first thing, those people have to get on board with this, and they are on board with it. But they're the enterprise-wide or organizational level leaders. So working with those people, we put together strategies for how to work with them. Doing her job, doing her job. Okay, Sophie, that's good. Thanks. Okay, that's good. Come on back. Come on. Yes, good job. Output. My point is made. Hey, enough output. All right. So now culture, of course, in order to change the culture, we have to work. We can't just work with the senior leaders. Once we have those people with a picture of the change we're trying to make, and we coach them and do the diagnosis and all that stuff, then we have to work with the different units, as I said. So the different units we would call groups. In our case, there are many, many, many different groups. We have many different facilities, about 300 of them across the United States. So inside those groups, you might have like a paper mill, and would have 1,000 employees or something like that. And then there will be groups inside the larger groups. So it's not just cut and dry, but the concept, the general concept of the organization level and the group level is very sound. So now we're going to change the culture. So we've been working with individual groups or units across the organization for the last several years to advance the culture, to move from the old state to the envisioned new state, which I described. So now, well, how do you really do that? Well, in order to change things, you have to get down to the individual level, because there is no such thing as collective change. It all comes down to individuals changing. When an individual in a team changes from existing state to a future state, well, that's great. But if all the individuals on a team change, well, a bunch of individuals make a group. And then a bunch of groups make a organization. And that's how we change things. So, now having said that, the systems model works like this. When we're talking about the organization level, at the organization level, the inputs that we look at are the general environment, industry structure, and other things, that they come inside the organization. Now, from the perspective of the people working in the organizations, then those design components that we have to work with include culture, like I said, technology, structure, the measurement systems we use, HR systems, strategy, and other things. And the outcome that we seek here, our outcome we seek is greater organizational effectiveness, or moving the organization from a current state to a better state. Now, that's the whole organization. Now, if we drop back to the group level, how do we think systems on the group level? Well, we think inputs, we think components, design things that we use are components that make something happen, and the outputs the same way, but our inputs are a little different. For changing a group, we think about organizational design, and then for the design components to change a group, or to conduct a diagnosis to change a group, we think about goal clarity, and we think about the group's function, task structure, the performance norms, and the composition of the group itself. And then the output that we seek, of course, it's not organizational effectiveness, it's better group effectiveness, of course, which contributes to the organization. Now, as OD consultants, we also, of course, work with individuals. So when we think about the systems model here with individuals, the inputs we have are organizational design, group design, the personal traits of the individual. Those are the inputs, or main inputs. And then the design components that we have to work with are the variety of skill that the individuals bring to the table when they do the work, autonomy, feedback, results about the work done, task identity, task significance, and the output that we seek on the individual level as consultants is individual effectiveness. So At the organizational level, our outcome we seek is greater organizational effectiveness or change in the organization, right? Group level, greater group effectiveness. Individual, greater individual effectiveness. They really can't be separated if you think about any kind of large scale change. Okay, but some change initiatives aren't large scale. For example, one manager in a particular organization might call in an OD consultant and say, I've got real issues with my team, and I want to make some changes in the jobs that they do. I want to have people do different things and try to get a better total output for the group. Okay, so we might work with that particular manager to put in place an intervention to move the group from current state to higher state, and we might work with the job descriptions and the roles people played, individual level, to make that group change work, and it might exist kind of in a bubble inside the organization. Maybe nobody else would do it except this one group. So some OD consultants specialize. They really tend to work with very small groups or units in the organization, while others tend to work with bigger groups in the organization, and a few try to work with the whole enterprise, the whole organization. Well, obviously, the higher you go, the more skill you need in order to be effective as a change consultant inside an organization. All right, so now that we understand systems, open systems theory, and we have a concept for the three levels that we work in, then we can start in our next conversation to think about how we actually diagnose, or some ways to diagnose what's going on in those organizations so that we can put together a plan, an intervention, and then we can implement that intervention, of course, then follow up with our last step to evaluate how well it did and then institutionalize that change. All right, that's it for now. Be safe. Talk to you soon. Bye.